The mountain is cold in its bones, not the surface cold of winter air or high altitude, the deeper cold of stone that has not seen sunlight in an age, that has been pressed by the weight of Xeraxagil for so long that warmth has become, for it, a theoretical concept rather than a memory. The air in the chamber of Mazarbul smells of this cold, mineral, ancient. The specific gray scent of rock that has outlasted everything that ever lived inside it. Underneath it, something older. The particular char of fires that have burned too long in closed spaces, dwarf fires, orc fires, and now the unmistakable iron-sulfur breath of something that preceded both. The bridge of Khazad Diem is a narrow spine of stone, crossing a chasm whose bottom is not visible from any vantage point the Fellowship has time to use. It was built in the age of Durin's glory to last until the mountain itself unmade it, and the mountain has not yet decided to do that. The bridge holds. Beneath it, the dark falls away into a depth that the eye registers and the mind declines to fully accept. Gandalf is the last across. He has always been the last across. He turns on the bridge with the specific quality of motion of someone who has decided something and is no longer debating it. The Fellowship is at the eastern door, 8 people in varying states of controlled terror, watching him from the threshold. He does not look at them. He looks at the thing that has followed them from the deepest level of the mine. The Balrog comes to the bridge the way ancient things move when they have nowhere to be except exactly here. Without hurry, without theater, with the simple purposefulness of a force that has been sleeping for 500 years and is now, at last, correctly awake. It is vast in the way that geological events are vast, not because of its precise dimensions, which are enormous but measurable, but because of its category. A Maya, a being of the same order as Gandalf himself, corrupted by the oldest shadow, wearing fire and darkness as a body, the way Gandalf wears gray wool. Ancient malice. Ancient power, ancient kinship, in the specific sense that kin can be the worst thing that comes for you. Gandalf knows this. He has always known this. The knowing is written in the oldest part of him, the part that existed before he was Gandalf, before he was Olrin even, before the name that the Valar gave him, in the part of his being that participated in the music of Ainulindal and heard all the themes, including the ones that ended badly. He sets his staff against the bridge. You cannot pass. The words land in the cold air with a weight that is not entirely physical, the weight of a declaration made by a being who is speaking in its deepest register, at the level of authority that preceded the world's current shape. Not a challenge. A statement of cosmological fact, offered to the Balrog as information it has the right to receive before the consequence arrives. The Balrog's answer is fire. It is always fire. The bridge cracks. The stone, old, patient, present through every age of the mountain's history, receives the impact of powers it was not built to contain, and renders its judgment. It breaks. The eastern half holds. The western half, and everything that was standing on it, does not. This is the moment. In the story as it was always meant to happen, the moment resolves in a specific way. A fall, a long battle in the deep, a death that is not quite a death, a return transformed. Sacrifice is the mechanism of elevation. Gandalf the Grey becoming Gandalf the White through the specific alchemy of having given everything and been given something back. He knows this. He knows it with a certainty that is one of the oldest facts in his possession. The shape of what was supposed to happen, the role he was cast in, the specific necessity of his own absence from the story's middle chapters so that Frodo could carry the weight that was his to carry. He knows all of it. He has known it since the Fellowship was formed. He has been carrying the knowledge of his own death the way you carry something that must not be put down until you reach the place where it belongs. The bridge is breaking. The Balrog's fire rises. He runs the calculation one final time. Not because it is unresolved. It resolved long ago, in some quiet, preconscious part of him that has been preparing for this answer without announcing it. He runs it because the decision deserves that acknowledgement, the full accounting of what it costs. His death will take weeks. The Fellowship will be leaderless in the most dangerous stretch of the journey. Frodo will go south without guidance, into Mordor, on the probability of a courage that is extraordinary and real and genuinely insufficient to what lies ahead of it. He has run this calculation before and always stopped at the same place. The next step is unacceptable. The bridge continues to break. The calculation finishes itself. He does not reach for the ring with his hand. He reaches for it with the part of him that has been quietly, precisely aware of it since the night of Bilbo's farewell at Bag End. When Bilbo held it in the lamplight before his final departure, and Gandalf felt, at the distance of breath, through 18 years of subsequent deliberate inattention, what it was. The part that has always known its location, its weight, its specific gravity in the moral architecture of the world. The part that has refused, every day for nearly 80 years, to answer the ring's awareness of him with his own awareness of it. He stops refusing. The ring has been waiting for a door. Not ambition's door. Gandalf has always been genuinely unambitious, in the way that only a being who has lived long enough to understand what ambition costs can be. Not fear's door. He has been afraid before, and it has never opened this particular entrance. The door it finds is the one he built himself, over nearly 80 years of refusing to run the calculation all the way to the end, the door of necessity, which opens inward and closes behind you and cannot be found from the other side. The ring comes to him. It does not travel. It does not glow. It does not arrive with ceremony or revelation. It is simply, with the quiet inevitability of a thing returning to the place it was always going to go, on his hand. The Balrog's fire is at his face. Gandalf speaks one word, not in Westron, not in Quenya, not in any language that was made for mouths and ears and the ordinary transactions of meaning between persons. In the register of Aul's workshop in the time before Middle-earth was shaped. In the language of the music that made everything, spoken by a Maya who is now carrying more of the architecture of reality inside him than any being other than Sauron has held in 3 ages of the world. The word means, approximately, be not. The Balrog's fire goes out. Not in a roar, not in a final dramatic conflagration, as cleanly and finally as a candle between 2 fingers. The body of fire and shadow, a Maya's form, corrupted past recovery, unmade by a power that reached the same foundational level at which it had been assembled, collapses. The darkness dispersed into the chasm below, the great wings gone, the ancient malice extinguished at the level of its physical expression, its spirit scattered to whatever depth would receive it. The ashes drift down into the dark below, and are gone before they reach wherever the bottom is. Gandalf stands on the broken bridge in the cold air of Moria. He turns. The Fellowship is at the eastern door, Aragorn at the front with his sword drawn, Legolas with an arrow still nocked, the hobbits clustered in the doorway with the specific expressions of people who have just watched a thing resolve in a way that is simultaneously better and worse than the alternative they feared. He looks at them. They look at him. The cold of the mountain holds the moment between them like water holds something dropped into it, perfectly, and only briefly, before the ripples begin. He is wearing the ring on his right hand. They can see it, a simple gold band, unremarkable in the torchlight, the kind of thing you would not look at twice if you saw it on a stranger's hand at an inn. Frodo's hand moves to his neck, the instinctive reach for something that has lived there so long the body has forgotten to account for its absence. He touches the empty chain. He looks at Gandalf's hand. He looks at Gandalf's face. Something has changed in the eyes. Not darker, brighter, more complete, more certain. The uncertainty that made Gandalf Gandalf, the wanderer's uncertainty, the asker of questions uncertainty, the specific, deliberate space he always left between his conclusions and the world's right to disagree with them, is gone. What has replaced it is older and quieter and more final, the absolute assurance of a mind that has resolved the only question that was ever genuinely uncertain about itself. Gandalf says, "The burden is lifted from you, Frodo, come there is much to do." His voice is Gandalf's voice. His words are words of kindness. The specific terror that moves through every member of the Fellowship, not as a shudder, not as a named fear, but as the particular cold of an understanding arriving before it can be articulated, is that they cannot yet identify what is wrong. They can only feel that what was on Frodo's chain has moved to Gandalf's hand, and that the world has a different center of gravity than it did 1 minute ago, and that the center is him. They follow him out of the dark. Of course they follow him. What else would they do? Aragorn does not argue for long. This is new. In the nearly 70 years that Aragorn, son of Arathorn, has been operating in the world as a ranger, a captain, and the secret heir of a dead kingdom, he has developed a precise understanding of which arguments can be won and which cannot. A skill that has kept him alive in situations specifically designed to produce the opposite outcome. He looks at Gandalf in the cold morning of the Dimrill Dale, with the eastern gate of Moria still audible behind them in the specific way of a door that has been closed on something enormous, and he begins to make his case. He makes it well. He names the risks, the Fellowship without its guide, the road south along the Silverlode. The gap in tactical knowledge that Gandalf's absence creates at precisely the moment when tactical knowledge is the Fellowship's primary asset. He is precise, and he is quick, and he does not appeal to sentiment, which would have been the wrong register. He appeals to strategy, which is the right one. Gandalf listens. He gives Aragorn the full attention he has always given him, the specific, respectful attention of a being who has watched this man from his earliest years and considers him, in the precise sense, one of the finest things produced by 3,000 years of Nedane lineage. He listens until Aragorn has finished. Then he says, 3 days. Wait for me at the Dimril Dale. The authority in the words is not the authority of a request. It is not the authority of a command, either, which requires an enforcement mechanism and an acknowledgement of the possibility of refusal. It is the authority of a statement about what will happen, delivered by a being who has recently acquired the capacity to make statements about what will happen and have them be accurate. Aragorn stops arguing. He looks at Gandalf for one long moment with the eyes of a man who has just measured a distance and found it larger than he thought. Then he turns to the Fellowship and begins organizing the march south. He is the first to understand what they have gained. He is the first to understand what they have lost. He keeps both understandings to himself, because the road south requires his full attention, and grief, in his experience, is best processed in motion. Gandalf watches them go. Then he walks back into the mountain. The upper halls of Moria in the hours after the Fellowship's passage are quiet in the specific way of a place where a great deal has just happened and the participants are still assessing their losses. Orc sign is everywhere, the evidence of the force that pursued them through the lower deeps, torches still burning in wall brackets, the scattered debris of a pursuit that ended badly for the pursuers. Gandalf walks through it at a pace that is neither hurried nor slow, the appropriate pace for a being doing work. He finds the first orc company in the great hall of Mazarbul. They are arrayed for engagement, crossbows leveled, scimitars drawn, torches held high against the dark. Several hundred soldiers occupying the hall in good tactical formation, with overlapping fields of fire and a clear line of retreat through the northern arch. Competent positioning. Someone among them knows what they are doing. Gandalf walks toward them. He does not raise his staff. He does not speak a word of power. He does not reach for the fire of Narya or the authority of his order in any register that would be recognizable as magic to anyone observing from outside. What he does is quieter and more complete. He extends the ring's operational field into the space of the hall the way a lamp extends light, not by any action, but by the simple fact of its presence, its warmth reaching outward from the source without effort or direction. The effect on the orcs is not fear. This is important. Fear would have produced a tactical response. The orcs of Moria have been fighting for centuries and they know what to do with fear, theirs and their enemies. What they feel is not fear. It is something their nature has buried so deep that the excavation of it takes a full 3 seconds of standing with crossbows leveled at a gray figure walking toward them. Recognition, not of Gandalf specifically, of the thing Gandalf is carrying, and what that thing is the master of. The One Ring was made by a Maya of All's order, in the tradition of craft that precedes every corruption that has ever warped a living being in Middle-earth. The orcs are corrupted elves. Tolkien knew this, and Sauron knew it when he made his ring, and he built into the ring's operating field the specific frequency of the authority that preceded the corruption. Their crossbows lower not because they have been commanded to lower them, but because the intention of firing them has become, in the ambient field of the ring's presence, simply unavailable. The way an argument becomes unavailable when a more fundamental truth has arrived. Gandalf stops 20 feet from the front rank. He looks at them. They look at him. He begins to speak. In their language, black speech and the rougher orcish pidgin beneath it, both of which he has known since before most languages currently spoken in Middle-earth existed. He is not performing fluency. He is simply speaking to them in the language appropriate to the conversation. Because Gandalf has always understood that the choice of language is the first and most significant signal of whether you intend to be understood or merely to speak. He explains what will happen now. He does not frame it as a choice, not because he is being deceptive about the available options, but because there are no available options, and framing the absence of choice as a choice would be imprecise. The mines of Moria have been in a state of structural decline for decades. Weight-bearing columns in the lower 7th level, showing stress fractures. The primary ventilation shafts of the second hall blocked by debris from the Balrog's long habitation. The great mining routes of the northern deeps collapsed and requiring systematic clearing before any productive extraction can resume. He knows all of this. The ring gave him access to the mountain's architecture the moment it came onto his hand. Sauron built the ring to know what it ruled, and Moria is stone, and stone is within the ring's understanding. He designates an overseer structure, 12 senior orcs by rank and demonstrated competence, each responsible for a specific remediation zone. He establishes accountability, weekly progress assessments conducted at the Eastern Gate, deliverables clearly defined, consequences for failure equally clear and proportionate. He explains what successful completion looks like and what recognition of successful completion looks like, because orcs are, in this as in most things, not different from any other workforce. They respond to the knowledge that their work will be correctly perceived. He does not say please. He says everything else. 6 hours later, Gandalf walks out the Eastern Gate into the cold afternoon of the Dimrill Dale. The Fellowship has kept their position on the hillside above, 8 people in various configurations of waiting, which each of them has approached according to their nature. Legolas has been on the high rock at the hill's eastern edge since mid-morning, watching the gate with the sustained attention of an elf who does not experience boredom as a category. He calls down when Gandalf emerges. The gate has been open for the last hour. We could hear sounds. A pause. Organized sounds. Gimli says, from his position nearest the gate, "What happened to the orcs?" Gandalf says, "They are working." The word lands in the cold afternoon air. Gimli processes it. Around him, the Fellowship processes it. The word is accurate and simple, and carries, in its simplicity, the specific weight of a thing that has been changed at its foundation, without any visible alteration to its surface. Working, the orcs of Moria are working. The mines of Khazad-dûm, his father's house, his people's greatest glory and their deepest wound, are being cleared of debris and assessed for structural integrity and prepared for something by the creatures that killed them. He says, working for whom? Gandalf says, with the patience of a being who has stopped experiencing this as a complicated question. Working for Moria. He walks past them and they fall into step behind him, as they always do, as they will continue to do. Gimli is last. He turns once at the foot of the hill and looks back at the Eastern Gate, where the sounds continue, rhythmic, purposeful, the sound of large numbers of beings applying organized effort to a specific task in a specific direction. The sound of labor, the sound of a home being, in some technical and accurate sense, restored. It is the sound of something deeply, precisely correct. It is the most wrong thing he has ever heard. He turns away from it and follows the Fellowship south, and the sound of Moria working fades behind him in the mountain afternoon and does not stop. Gandalf does not arrive at Isengard the way he arrived at everything before Moria. Before the bridge, his arrivals were calibrated performances of deliberate limitation. The wandering wizard. The old man with fireworks. The gray figure on a tired horse who needed a meal and brought news and left you feeling, afterward, that the conversation had been more significant than it appeared while it was happening. He was precise about his own apparent imprecision. The cloak of the ordinary was the most useful tool in his possession. And he wore it with the commitment of someone who understood that the greatest power in the world is the power that does not need to announce itself. That understanding remains. What has changed is that it no longer applies to him. He rides toward the gates of Isengard in full daylight, alone, at the unhurried pace of a man on a road he has walked before and expects to finish without incident. The ring is on his hand. He has not hidden it. There is, at this point in his understanding of what he has become, no tactical value in concealment. The ring's presence is not a secret that can be kept from any being of sufficient sensitivity, and Saruman is many things, but insufficiently sensitive is not among them. Let him feel it coming. Let him have the time to prepare. The preparation will not help him, but he deserves the courtesy of it. The Uruk-hai at the gate feel the ring's presence at approximately 400 yards. This is measurable in their behavior, the specific sequence of physical adjustments that occurs in a trained soldier when the ambient conditions change in a way that the training did not cover. First, the stillness, the interruption of the ordinary mechanical movement of guards on a rotation, the sudden arrest of motion that looks, from a distance, like statuary. Then the orientation, every figure at the gate turning toward the approaching figure with the unified attention of beings whose nervous systems have just received a signal that overrides the posted orders. Then the step back, not a retreat, a reposition, the body's honest acknowledgement that the geometry of the situation has changed, and the old position is no longer the correct one. The gate swings open before Gandalf reaches it. He does not slow. He rides through at the same pace and does not look at the Uruk-hai who have pressed themselves against the interior wall with the specific posture of soldiers who have discovered that their weapons are not relevant to the current situation. He notes them without comment. He rides toward Orthanc. Saruman is on his balcony. Of course he is. Saruman has always had the political intelligence to be in the correct position before a significant conversation began. The high ground, the architectural authority of the tower at his back, the voice positioned to carry down to whoever stood in the stone courtyard below. He has managed 1,000 conversations from that balcony with the precise understanding that where you stand determines half the content of what you say before you open your mouth. He opens his mouth. The voice is extraordinary. This must be acknowledged even now, even knowing what it is and what it serves. The voice of Saruman is an extraordinary instrument. It carries the accumulated craft of a Maya of Ol's order, who spent his first 3 ages of Middle-earth studying the persuasive structures of language and the vulnerabilities they engage. It finds in each listener the specific lever of desire or fear or pride that will move them, and it applies exactly the right pressure at exactly the right angle. It has never failed him in a direct engagement. He gives Gandalf the full measure of it. The acknowledgement of Gandalf's power and wisdom, genuine, precise. The flattery that works because it is not quite flattery, because it is accurate about the qualities it names and only distorted in its conclusions. The invitation to shared purpose. The argument that 2 Maiar are of the same sending. The last significant agents of the Valar remaining in Middle-earth should not waste their strength in opposition when combination would serve the world better. The distinction between their different origins collapsed by the voice into a convenient unity. The way the voice always collapses distinctions that would complicate the argument it is making. The contempt for lesser beings, present in the voice not as stated opinion but as ambient assumption, the slow-working sediment of an argument designed to make Gandalf feel the fellowship of a being who has transcended ordinary moral categories. It is, even now, masterfully done. Gandalf listens from the courtyard below with his hands at his sides and his face turned upward. And he gives Saruman the thing he has always given him, his full attention. Not performed attention, real attention, the genuine engagement of a mind that considers even its opponents worth listening to completely. He has always believed this. The ring has not changed it. Saruman finishes. Gandalf does not argue. He looks at Saruman, not at the voice, not at the performance, not at the calibrated architecture of the argument, at Saruman. The specific, particular being who has been standing behind the voice for this entire conversation, managing it. Operating it like the instrument it is. Believing, because Saruman has always believed this. It is the founding assumption of everything he has become, that the instrument is sufficient to conceal the operator. The ring gives Gandalf access to the interior of things. Not through any mystical perception, the ring was made for dominion, and dominion requires knowledge, and knowledge of a being means the ability to read what they have made of themselves beneath the surface of what they present. He reads Saruman the way a cartographer reads terrain, completely, without judgment in the emotional sense, with the precise judgment of a mind that is simply noting what is there. What is there is this, a being of genuine brilliance who chose, at the precise moment when his brilliance was sufficient to see all available paths, the path of self-deception. Not stupidity. Saruman is not stupid, has never been stupid, will never be stupid. Something requiring more intelligence than stupidity. The sustained, sophisticated project of convincing himself that his choices were wisdom rather than fear, that his alliance with power was strategy rather than cowardice, that his solitude was superiority rather than the accumulated result of a loneliness so old and so deep that he has long since stopped being able to look directly at it. The vanity that chose the form of intellect, the cowardice dressed as strategy, the loneliness that made the Palantir more comfortable than counsel. Gandalf sees all of it. He does not hide that he sees it. He speaks, not loudly, not with the projected authority of a being performing power, but in the ordinary carrying voice of a conversation between 2 people in a courtyard, which is what this is. He describes Saruman to Saruman. Not as accusation. Accusation would require a position of moral elevation from which to condemn, and Gandalf does not perform that elevation, because he does not need to. He describes. He names what is there with the same neutral precision a physician brings to a diagnosis. This is present. This is its nature. This is its origin. This is what it has produced. The voice cannot respond to a description. This is the thing Saruman discovers in the long moment of silence after Gandalf finishes speaking, that the instrument he has spent 3 ages perfecting has no answer to what has just been done to it. The voice was built on leverage, the finding of the listener's pressure point and the application of precisely calibrated force. There is no leverage in being seen accurately. There is no counter-argument to a description that is correct. Saruman's intelligence, which is real, extraordinary, and has been the primary tool of his existence since before men were a significant species, runs through its available responses and arrives at the same answer in each direction: nothing. The man who has never lost a conversation finds that the conversation has ended without his participation, resolved at a level below the one he was operating on. He grips the balcony rail. His hands are white at the knuckles. Gandalf is already walking toward the tower door. He breaks Saruman's staff in the entry hall of Orthanc, where the stone is cold and the walls are inscribed with the accumulated knowledge of 3 ages of a very particular kind of obsession. The staff comes apart at the touch of the ring's authority the way a made thing comes apart when its maker's power is superseded, cleanly, finally, without drama. He sets the pieces aside. "You will not need that," he says. "There is a great deal of documentation to be organized. The assignment is this: Chief Archivist of the Order's Historical Record System. The complete repository of all knowledge about the ages of the world, the First Age's wars and losses, the Second Age's long seduction and fall, the Third Age's diminishments and the specific. Detailed history of how Middle-earth arrived at its current condition. All of it to be maintained, organized, cross-referenced, and annotated by the sharpest scholarly mind that has ever applied itself to the subject. The broken staff is filed in the archive of recovered instruments, correctly catalogued. What remains is the man himself, the accumulated craft knowledge of a Maya of All's order, undiminished, precisely because Gandalf has no use for diminished things. His intelligence is preserved. His ambition is given the most precise possible container, an office with a view of Isengard's reconstructed gardens, an enormous quantity of extremely important work, and the perpetual, daily, inescapable experience of being the most knowledgeable person in a room that Gandalf will never need to enter, because Gandalf already knows everything in it. He will produce extraordinary scholarship. The archive he builds will be the finest record of Middle-earth's history ever compiled. He will do it in the specific hell of a man who has been correctly seen and correctly used, who has been valued for exactly what he is and nothing more than what he is, and who understands, with the full force of the intelligence that has made him what he is, that the difference between what he was given and what he wanted is the difference between a perfect description of a cage and an open door. The door is not open, the description is perfect. He picks up a pen. He goes to work. Thodun's healing takes 11 minutes. In the canonical story, the one that did not happen, the one that exists now only as a path not taken. Visible from this one the way a road is visible from the field beside it, the healing takes longer. It requires the gradual, effortful process of a will reasserting itself against a corruption that has been working on it for years. The specific, painful return of a man to himself through the accumulated effort of memory and dignity, and the refusal, finally, to remain diminished. It is a restoration in the full sense, something recovered, something reclaimed, something that had to fight its way back to its own surface. Under the ring, it takes 11 minutes, because 11 minutes is how long the process requires when the will doing the healing does not need to argue with the corruption. Gandalf simply looks at Thodun with the ring's full perception active, reads the architecture of Gurma's work the way a locksmith reads a lock, from the inside, following the mechanism to its point of vulnerability, and undoes it, not with fire or authority or the dramatic staging of the canonical scene, with precision. The corruption was a made thing, constructed according to specific principles by a specific intelligence for a specific purpose, and made things can be unmade by someone who understands how they were built. The King of Rohan opens his eyes in his chair in the Golden Hall, and they are clear, entirely, immediately clear. Not the gradual clearing of a man coming back from somewhere far away, but the sudden clarity of a man who has been somewhere very far away and has arrived back at full speed. He blinks once. He looks at Gandalf. He sits up straight. He is magnificent. This is the word that will follow Thodun from this moment through the rest of his reign, spoken by his people and his enemies and the historians who will attempt to account for what Rohan became in the years of the Order: magnificent. Brave with a bravery that does not calculate risk, because the calculation has been replaced by something more absolute. Decisive with a decisiveness that does not hesitate, because hesitation requires the acknowledgement that the decision could be wrong. Just, with an exacting, total, unsparing justice that the Code of Rohan has always theoretically demanded and never quite achieved in practice. Because practice requires the tolerance of imperfection that theory does not. The ring's effect on Théoden is not a replacement of his will. This is important. Gandalf has no interest in puppets. He has never valued compliance, has always valued excellence. And a Théoden emptied of himself and refilled with Gandalf's preferences would be less than the Théoden that walked into Helm's Deep under his own conviction and held it. What the ring does to Théoden is simpler and more permanent. It removes, from the ambient field of Théoden's decision-making, the uncertainty that makes great men cautious and cautious men great. The uncertainty is gone. What remains is Théoden distilled, the finest expression of what Théoden always was, the king that the Code of Rohan was written to produce, operating at full capacity without the drag of doubt. He is everything his culture aspired to generate. The result is extraordinary and absolute, and, in the way of all absolute things, slightly terrible to stand near. Owen notices it first. Not the change in her uncle. That change is visible from the steps of Meduseld, the new quality of his step on the stone, the specific angle of his shoulders that signals a man carrying his own weight again after years of carrying someone else's instead. She notices that. Everyone notices that. What she notices first, in the specific way that people notice things about situations they have personal stakes in, which is more completely than people without stakes notice anything, is the change in the room. The Golden Hall has always had a specific quality of light at midday, the way the sun comes through the high windows at an angle that catches the hanging arms and the carved pillars and fills the space with a warmth that is half architectural and half the accumulated presence of 5 centuries of a people who understood that a hall is not a building but an argument about what a people are for. She has grown up in this light. She knows its ordinary quality. The light is the same. The quality is different. It is brighter in a way that has nothing to do with the sun's position, brighter with the specific luminosity of a room in which the ambient field of Gandalf's ring authority is fully active, in which the air itself carries the settled weight of a judgment about what is good and what is not, that has already been made and does not require her input. She stands in this light, and she is not afraid. She is not unhappy. She is, in every external and measurable sense, precisely well, her uncle restored, her people's safety imminent, her own martial gifts recognized by the being who has arrived to set things right. Gandalf sees her quality with the complete clarity he brings to everything, sees the warrior she is, the courage that has been waiting for the shape it belongs in, the specific, bright, cold edge of a person who was born for something that her world has been refusing to ask of her. He asks it. He gives her command authority. He removes the old convention the way he removes everything that does not serve, by simply, accurately declaring it not applicable. She will fight. She will be recognized. She will be given every external expression of the value she has always had. She stands in the golden light of Meduseld and receives all of this with the precise, composed grace of a woman who knows how to hold herself in difficult circumstances. And she notes, in the quiet interior space that is the last private room available in a world where Gandalf's authority has changed the air of every external room, that the thing she has received is everything she asked for, and that the asking, now, is no longer necessary. Her courage was always real. It is now also approved. She is trying to determine, in the quiet interior room, whether she can tell the difference. She is finding it more difficult than she expected. Gurma Wormtongue is found in the lower rooms of Meduseld, where he retreated when Gandalf entered the hall. He has the posture of a man who has calculated every available option and found the inventory shorter than expected. A slight compression of the frame. The stillness of someone who has learned that in the moments when all choices are bad, the body's best contribution is to offer no additional information. He looks at Gandalf with the dark, careful eyes of a man who is very intelligent and knows precisely what his intelligence has been used for and has not, until this moment, been confronted with a being for whom that knowledge constitutes a complete picture. Gandalf looks at him. He reads him in the way he reads everyone now, completely, without the friction of uncertainty. He finds a man of genuine and considerable intelligence, the kind of encyclopedic political intelligence that can only be developed by someone who has spent their life studying the people around them with total attention, because the alternative to understanding people completely is being at their mercy, and Gurma has never been willing to be at anyone's mercy if information could be acquired. Instead, he finds a detailed knowledge of Rohan's noble genealogies, its political structures, its historical disputes and alliances, and the specific fault lines between its great families that have shaped its decisions for 2 centuries. He finds a man who chose betrayal not because he was without alternatives, but because he became convinced, early and thoroughly, that being valued for what he knew was not available to him, that the world would take his knowledge and ignore him, and that the only way to matter was to take what mattered from the world first. Gandalf assigns him keeper of Edoras' historical and genealogical records. The appointment is made in the same room where Gurma spent 3 years poisoning the man he is now being ordered to serve. The detail is not lost on Gurma. Nothing is lost on Gurma. The precision of his intelligence, which is the quality that made him useful to Saruman and now makes him useful to the Order, is also the quality that ensures he perceives exactly what has been done to him. He is given an office in the Golden Hall, 3 assistants, the most complete access to Rohan's historical documentation ever granted to a single scholar. The exact role his intelligence was always suited for, the role that would have been available to him if he had not decided, in the specific bitterness of an early wound, that availability was not something the world offered him. He does it well. He has always been good at this. He has been good at it for his entire life, and has spent his entire life applying the skill and directions that produced his current situation. And the current situation is that he is very good at his work in the house of the man he betrayed in the city, whose destruction he helped plan, valued and employed and occupying precisely the role that his nature designed him for, with no complaint available that would not immediately demonstrate the accuracy of the arrangement. The hell is not the work. The work is fine. The hell is that the work is fine. He opens the first of the historical documents and begins to read. Across the hall, Thodin is planning the next campaign, decisive, fearless, magnificent, the king that the Code of Rohan was written to produce. His voice carries through the walls with the specific resonance of absolute conviction. The Rohirrim around him respond to it with the elevated attention of soldiers who have been given, by the ambient quality of the air in Edoras since Gandalf's arrival, a reason to be their finest selves at all times. They are their finest selves at all times. It is, Gurma notes in the first entry of the new administrative record, a magnificent culture. He writes the observation in his careful, precise hand and files it correctly. He does not write what else he notices. The space on the page where the rest of the observation would go remains white and adequate and perfectly, permanently empty. The battle that would have destroyed half of Gondor's remaining population does not happen. This is a genuine good. It must be registered as one, clearly and without irony, before anything else is said about what Gandalf's arrival in Minas Tirith costs: the Pelennor Fields engagement, the cavalry charge, the siege towers, the fell beasts dropping from a sky black with Mordor's intention. The specific terrible arithmetic of 10,000 men dying on the plain before the city they were defending, none of it occurs. The strategic calculation that produced that battle was based on a Sauron and unchallenged command of his forces, moving against a city whose most powerful potential ally had been neutralized, and whose steward was already breaking under the weight of a Palantir madness that had been cultivated for years. Remove the unchallenged command. Remove the neutralized ally. Remove the breaking steward, because Denethor has not yet been brought to the final edge of it. The vision of Frodo in Mordor has not been deployed against him. The Palantir sickness is advanced, but not yet total. He is still, recognizably, himself. The army of Mordor that advanced toward the Pelennor reads the change in its operational environment the way any army reads a fundamental shift in. The strategic situation, it stops. It does not retreat immediately. Sauron's forces do not retreat from uncertainty. They hold position and reassess, but it stops its advance. And the stopping is itself the data that Gandalf needs to confirm what the ring has already told him. The campaign for Minas Tirith has become, before a single siege engine reaches the Ramus Eker, a different kind of problem. He enters the city from the north through the Great Gate in the afternoon of a day in late February, when the light comes off the Mindalluin at an angle that has always made the white stone of Minas Tirith look like something between a city and a declaration. The gate guards let him through. They let him through the way the Isengard gate opened before him, not from a command, not from a recognized authority signal, but from the body's decision, arriving just ahead of the mind's, that the geometry of the situation has changed, and the old position is no longer the one to hold. He goes directly to the citadel. Denethor receives him in the hall of the steward, not the throne room, not Ecthelion's tower, but the working hall where the administrative business of Gondor has been conducted for 30 years of his stewardship. The choice of room is itself a statement. This is my ground. This is where I work. This is where I am most completely what I am. Denethor has always understood that the choice of venue is the first argument in any conversation, and he has chosen the venue most likely to produce the version of himself that is hardest to reduce. He is standing. He will not sit while Gandalf is here. He is in this moment still recognizably the man who has managed the impossible task of maintaining Gondor's coherence through 3 decades of escalating shadow. The most brilliant political mind in a city that has produced brilliant political minds as its primary export for 1,000 years. The man who has never, in 30 years of stewardship, made a significant strategic error that was not the result of information he could not have possessed, rather than judgment he failed to apply. He is wearing the rod of the stewards with the unconscious ease of someone for whom it has been an extension of the self for so long that the boundary between them is notional. His eyes, when they find Gandalf's, are the eyes of a man who has been studying this encounter in his mind since he felt the change in the Palantir's ambient field and understood, before any rider brought word, that something fundamental had shifted in the world's structure. He does not greet Gandalf. He says, "You have taken it." Not a question. An assessment made from data and delivered as a conclusion. Denethor has always operated this way, the conversation beginning at the point where lesser minds would still be gathering premises. Gandalf says, yes. Denethor looks at the ring on Gandalf's hand for a long moment. Then he looks at Gandalf's face. Then he begins. He argues better than Saruman. This must be said plainly because it is true, and because truth, in this hall on this afternoon, is the only currency that matters. Denethor's argument against what Gandalf has done is the finest argument against it that Middle-earth's political intelligence can produce, and it is better than Saruman's, because it is not about Saruman. Saruman argued for himself. His logic was the logic of a man who needed to be right, whose argument was ultimately a performance of his own superiority dressed in the language of strategy. Denethor argues for a principle. The principle is this: the peoples of Middle-earth have the right to make their own catastrophic mistakes. He makes the case in the precise, undecorated language of a man who does not believe that rhetoric adds anything to a correct argument and has spent 30 years stripping every available trace of it from the way he speaks. He names what Gandalf has done not with contempt, but with the specific, clinical accuracy of an analyst characterizing a situation, the removal of the experience of being saved from the people who are being saved. He says a people preserved rather than preserved themselves are not the same people at the end of it. The specific quality of what they become, the relationship they have to their own survival, the knowledge of what it cost, the ownership of the decision to pay that cost, changes when the preservation is external to their will rather than an expression of it. He says, "You have not saved Gondor. You have created a different city that occupies the same geography and bears the same name and has no experience of having chosen to survive." He says, "Do you understand the difference?" And the question is genuine. He wants to know if Gandalf has thought this through, has mapped the distinction between the city he has preserved and the city that would have preserved itself, has counted the cost of what he has done in the specific currency of human self-determination that his intervention has removed from the world's treasury. He is right. Gandalf hears him being right. The specific quality of the silence between Denethor's conclusion and Gandalf's response is the silence of a being who has heard a correct argument and is not going to pretend it is incorrect. Gandalf has never been comfortable with dishonesty. The ring has not made him more comfortable with it. What it has done is give him, in addition to the knowledge that Denethor is correct, the knowledge of what Denethor's correctness costs. Gandalf says a number. He says it the way a man reads a measurement from an instrument, clearly, without context, letting the number occupy its own space in the air before anything is said around it. The number is the count of Gondorian soldiers, civilians, and civilians of the surrounding lands who would have died in the Pelennor Fields engagement in the timeline from which this one has diverged. He has calculated it with the ring's knowledge of Sauron's force composition, Gondor's defensive capacity, and the military mathematics of siege warfare at this specific strategic ratio. The number is precise. It is not rounded. It is not approximate. He says the number aloud. Then he says, how many deaths is the abstract principle of self-determination worth? The question is not rhetorical. He wants the answer. He wants to know if Denethor has a number, if the man who has spent 30 years making impossible calculations can find, in his precise and unsparing arithmetic, a figure that he is willing to set against the one Gandalf has just placed in the air between them. Denethor is quiet. He is quiet in the specific way of a man who has encountered a mathematical problem he cannot solve without surrendering a premise he needs to keep, who is running the calculation in full awareness that all available results are wrong in different ways and at different costs. He knows the counter-argument, that the number is real but the principle is also real, that you cannot resolve a question of political philosophy by arithmetic, that the worth of self-determination is not denominated in bodies and cannot be made to be. He knows this argument. He has made versions of it for 30 years in smaller rooms about smaller numbers. The number is not small. He looks at Gandalf. He looks at the ring. He looks at the rod of the stewards in his own hand, the instrument of an office that has always been defined by the holding of something in trust for someone else, the maintenance of a position that is not and has never been entirely his own. He has spent 30 years being correct about what he is, in the privacy of his own assessment, the placeholder, the caretaker, the man who maintains rather than creates. He inclines his head, not to a king. There is no king in this, and Denethor would not bow to kingship simply because it arrived with sufficient force to make bowing a rational act. He inclines his head to a logic, to a number he cannot answer while remaining the man who has always required himself to answer to numbers. It is the most complete defeat available to a man of his quality, and its completeness is precisely what gives it its integrity. He is not broken. He is out-argued on his own terms, in his own hall, by a being who has learned the terms from watching him apply them for 30 years. He sits. Faramir has been standing at the hall's eastern pillar since the exchange began. He has not moved and has not spoken and has not been asked to. He is there as a witness, which is a role he has occupied more than any other in his father's hall, the position of the younger son in a family whose primary drama is always between someone else. He watches his father, who has never in Faramir's entire life been the man who found the last word and could not use it, find it and set it down. He watches Denethor's hand reach for Faramir's arm and stop before it arrives, the motion of a man who began the gesture of accepting comfort and realized midway through that he does not have a right to it in this moment. That accepting comfort would be a way of attributing to himself a wound that the situation does not actually warrant. He is not wounded. He is correct and he is overruled, and those are not the same thing as wounded, and Denethor has always been precise about the difference. He is fine. He is precisely, accurately, correctly located in the world as it now is. He is fine. Faramir keeps his hand where it is, extended slightly toward a father who will not take it, and holds it there until the moment has passed, and the hall resumes its ordinary quality of light, and the white tree is visible through the southern window, blooming in the late afternoon with the specific insistence of something that is doing exactly what it is supposed to do. It is in full bloom. It has never looked less like hope. The Orthanc stone is older than the tower that holds it. This is not a metaphor. The Palantri were made in Menor by Fëanor's descendants in the Second Age, carried to Middle-earth by Elendil as instruments of governance and communication across the vast distances of the New Kingdom. And the stone that sits now in the uppermost chamber of Isengard's Black Tower has been in this world long enough to have passed through the hands of kings, stewards, and one corrupted wizard, accumulating in its dark surface the residue of every mind that has looked into it. It holds nothing. It transmits everything. It is, of all the instruments in Middle-earth that concentrate and conduct the will of those who use them, the most precisely suited to what Gandalf intends. He intends offense. This has never been done. Every previous engagement with Sauron through the network of seeing stones has been fundamentally defensive, the bearer of a Palantir attempting to maintain their will and their secrets against the focused pressure of the greatest mind in Middle-earth, operating on its home terrain, applying 3 ages of experience at psychological penetration to the specific vulnerabilities of whoever was unwise or desperate enough to look into the stone. Denethor maintained his secrets for years and paid for it with his sanity. Pippin was read like a document. Even Aragorn, in the story that did not happen, the one that exists now as a path visible from the field beside this road, used the stone as a provocation rather than a weapon, a declaration rather than an invasion. Gandalf does not provoke. He does not declare. He looks into the stone at the time and in the manner of his choosing, and he reaches. The connection opens the way a door opens when you have the key and you know the lock, and there is no uncertainty in the hand that turns, without drama, without the sense of resistance overcome, simply as a fact of the mechanism doing what it was made to do when the right authority applies to it. The stone responds to the ring's presence the way the gate at Isengard responded. The way the orcs in Mazarbul responded, the way everything in Middle-earth that was made in the age of Sauron's dominion responds, with the recognition of an authority that precedes its current configuration, running deeper than its present allegiances. The channel between Orthanc and Barad, Doctor opens. Sauron is there immediately. He is always there. The eye does not sleep, does not turn away, does not experience the channel between the stones as anything other than a corridor of dominion that he has owned since the last of Gondor's Palantir keepers fell. He arrives in the connection with the full weight of 3,000 years of practice at exactly this, the focused application of a superior will through a medium designed to transmit it. He arrives the way he always arrives in these encounters, already in motion, already reaching, already finding the shape of the mind on the other end of the connection. He reaches toward Gandalf. He finds a mind that knows him. The specific quality of this finding, the experience of reaching for a vulnerability and encountering, instead of a vulnerability, a map, is something Sauron has not felt before in any engagement through the stones. He has encountered resistance, Denethor's iron will, held against him for years through sheer aristocratic refusal to yield. He has encountered confusion, Pippin's undisciplined hobbit consciousness, genuinely difficult to read because it organized itself according to no logic Sauron had previously studied. He has encountered defiance, Aragorn's deliberate projection of Isildur's sword, a political statement sent like a weapon. He has never encountered a mind that is not defending itself, because it does not need to. Gandalf does not project fire into the connection. He does not project light or authority or the dramatic imagery of a Maya asserting dominion over the dark. What he projects is knowledge, specifically, the knowledge of Sauron that he has accumulated across 2,000 years of thinking about him. Not as an abstraction, not as a theology of evil, but as a subject of study, the particular mind of Myron who was made in the order of Ol, who learned the craft of making, and found in it a love of order that was genuine before it was corrupted, who served Morgoth not entirely from cowardice, but from the specific philosophical error of a being who confused the imposition of pattern with the creation of meaning. He knows the structure of Sauron's thinking. He knows its history, the progressive simplification of a mind that began complex and became single-purpose through 3 ages of choosing domination over every other available interest, until the mind that remains is extraordinarily powerful within its chosen dimension and genuinely, permanently blind outside it. He knows Sauron's fears, which are the photographic negative of his ambitions, the exact shapes of the things he is reaching toward because the alternative is to acknowledge their absence. He knows Sauron's deepest wound, which is not the last alliance and the loss of the ring, but what preceded it, the surprise of it, the miscalculation, the world not behaving as it was supposed to behave. Sauron has spent 3,000 years ensuring that the world will not surprise him again. This is the armature of everything he has built. A system sophisticated enough that its outcomes are predictable, a network of dominion comprehensive enough that the variables reduce to manageable numbers. He cannot tolerate surprise, because surprise means the model was wrong. And if the model is wrong, then the 3,000 years of work predicated on the model are wrong, and that is not a cost he can absorb. Gandalf knows this. He has always known this. He shows it to Sauron, not as accusation, not as the projection of a mirror designed to wound. That would be theater, and theater requires a distance between the performer and the performed. And there is no distance here. He shows Sauron to Sauron the way a craftsman shows a piece of work its own construction. Here is the grain of the material. Here is where the shaping was done. Here is the tension in this joint, and the reason it is there, and the cost it carries, and the compensating strength built around it to account for it. Accurate, complete, without malice, and without mercy. Because malice and mercy are both forms of relationship between the observer and the observed, and this is not a relationship. This is a description. The eye has burned with the specific intensity of a will that has never doubted itself through 3 ages of the world. Not because doubt was unavailable to it, Sauron is not unintelligent, is not incapable of self-examination, but because the system he has built is designed to make doubt non-functional. He constructed a world in which his own assessment of the world is confirmed by the behavior of the world, because he has shaped the world's behavior to confirm it. He has been right continuously for a very long time, and being continuously right produces in any mind a texture of assurance that functions eventually like architecture, load-bearing, structural, invisible, because it holds everything else up. Gandalf does not attack the architecture, he illuminates it. And Sauron, who has been in darkness of his own construction for 3,000 years, who has built the darkness so thoroughly that he has ceased to experience it as darkness and experiences it instead as simply the condition of existence, Sauron encounters light. Not the warm light of Narya, not the hot light of conflict, not the red light of Mordor's fires. The cold, specific light of a mind that has mapped him completely and found the mapping, while comprehensive, unremarkable. The eye flickers. It does not go out. He is too old and too strong for a single encounter, however precise, to extinguish 3,000 years of accumulated will. But it flickers, contracts, briefly, from the full blazing aperture of a consciousness that has never questioned its own centrality to the world's structure, to something fractionally smaller, fractionally uncertain, fractionally aware of the gap between what it has been assuming about itself and what has just been reflected back to it. Sauron has broken every mind he has encountered through the stones. He has extracted secrets, shattered wills, used the Palantir as an instrument of devastation so reliable that its reliability has itself become part of his model of the world. The model has just produced an anomaly. Gandalf ends the connection. Not because he is tired, the ring sustains him beyond any previous limit of endurance. Not because the encounter has reached its natural conclusion. He could hold the channel open indefinitely and continue the mapping, and Sauron would not recover the initiative within this engagement. He ends it because the objective has been achieved, and continuing beyond the achievement of an objective is the waste of resource that he is no longer willing to permit in anything he does. He sets his hands on the surface of the Palantir, the cold, dark glass of it, the stone that has held this connection and done its work correctly, and he removes them. The connection closes. The stone's surface goes dark. He is alone in the uppermost chamber of Orthanc. Below him, Isengard's reconstructed grounds are quiet in the night air, the sounds of the remediation work that has been ongoing since his arrival, the organized movement of large numbers of beings who have been given correct direction and are following it. The smell of the night is cold stone and turned earth, and faintly, the first suggestion of the green things that will come through it in spring. He does not celebrate what happened in the stone. He files it. Sauron's model has encountered an anomaly. An anomaly produces reassessment, and reassessment produces delay. And delay in the operational tempo of Mordor's campaign means days in which the populations of the Western lands are not subject to what they would otherwise be subject to, and those days have a number that Gandalf can calculate. And the number is real. The eye, which has not flickered in 3,000 years, has flickered. It will not flicker again. Sauron will close the vulnerability that produced it, will rebuild the architecture of his certainty around the crack that the encounter opened, will construct with his extraordinary intelligence a compensating structure that accounts for this new data. He is good at this. He has always been good at this. But there is something he cannot rebuild. Once a mind has been shown its own construction from the outside, once the interior experience of certainty has been interrupted by the external fact of being seen completely, the certainty can be reconstructed, but not restored. What Sauron had before the connection opened was original. What he will build after it will be made. And made things, as Gandalf knows with a precision that comes from wearing the ring of the world's greatest maker, made things always bear the mark of the moment they were made. They always know what they are compensating for. He descends from the chamber. The night continues. The work of Isengard proceeds in the dark below. In Barad Doctor, 3,000 miles to the east, the eye that does not sleep is doing something it has not done in an age. It is reconsidering. The Malern trees at the edge of Lothlorien are still gold. But it is a different gold than it was. Galadriel knows this the way she knows the state of every tree in the wood, not through inspection or measurement, but through the continuous. Embodied awareness of a ring-bearer whose relationship to the land she preserved has been, for nearly 5,000 years, less like ownership and more like the relationship between a mind and the body it inhabits. Constant, specific, the information arriving without request, because the connection is structural. She knows the state of each tree the way she knows the state of each breath. The gold has changed. It is the gold of something in its last season rather than something exempt from seasons. The specific, beautiful, terminal gold of leaves that are not falling yet, but have begun the internal process that ends in falling. The change is not visible to any eye that has not spent nearly 5,000 years learning to read this particular light. It is visible to hers. She has been standing at the border of the wood since before dawn. Not waiting, she does not experience what she is doing as waiting, which implies uncertainty about whether the thing will arrive. It will arrive. She is simply here, at the border, in the gray pre-dawn cold, with the smell of the border stream in the air and the sound of the wood behind her doing its quiet, diminishing work. Because this is where the encounter will happen, and she intends to be exactly where the encounter will happen when it does. She hears him before she sees him. Not his footsteps. Gandalf has always moved quietly for a man of his apparent age, and under the ring he moves with the specific quietness of a being for whom the physical world no longer presents the friction it once did. What she hears is the wood's response to his approach, a settling, a slight compression of the ambient sound of the leaves and the stream and the pre-dawn birds, the forest's equivalent of the stillness that falls over a room when someone of significance enters it. The wood knows what is coming. She has taught it, over nearly 5,000 years, to be attentive. It is attentive now. He comes out of the gray morning between the trees and stops at the border stream. They look at each other across the water. She is not afraid. He sees this immediately and registers it with the complete, neutral accuracy he brings to every observation, but underneath the neutrality, in the part of him that is still, in its deep structure. The Maya who walked in the gardens of Loran before the world was made and loved the things that grew there, something that functions as recognition. She is the only person he has encountered since the bridge who is genuinely constitutionally not afraid of him. Not because she is stronger, the question of relative strength, in this encounter, has been resolved by what he carries and is not ambiguous. Because she has been where he is. She refused it, but she has stood in the space where he is standing, felt the specific weight of the offer, understood what it contained and what it cost, and what it would do to the person who accepted it. She is not afraid of him the way a person is not afraid of a mirror. She is angry. The anger is enormous and old, and of a specific quality that he has not encountered in any of the others. Not the hot anger of betrayal, not the cold anger of political defeat, not the precise anger of a man like Denethor being out-argued on his own terms. This is the anger of someone watching a beloved colleague do the things she most feared they would do. The anger that is closest in its texture to grief, that has grief running through it the way cold water runs through warm, the two things inseparable, and neither one canceling the other. He crosses the stream. He says, "Look at what is dying here." He does not gesture, there is no need. The word here encompasses everything available to their combined perception. The changing quality of the gold above them, the specific temperature of the border air that carries in it the first suggestion of the seasons that Nenya used to hold at bay, the sound of the wood behind her working through the arithmetic of a world without preservation. He is not accusing her. He is presenting data, in the way he presents everything now, completely, without the softening that would make it easier to receive and also less accurate. He says, this is what the refusal costs. Not abstractly, specifically, these trees. This light. This wood that has existed in this quality of existence for nearly 5,000 years because a will was applied to preserving it. And that will is no longer applied, and the trees are doing what trees do in the absence of the will that exempted them from it. He says, every moment I refuse, something beautiful dies. I have decided that the cost of refusal is too high. She says, you have decided that for everyone. The sentence is quiet and complete, and lands in the borderwood morning with the weight of something that has been precisely aimed. Not at him, she has passed the point of trying to wound him, has understood since she felt the rings claiming through Nenya's connection that wounding is not available to her in this encounter. She is naming what he has done. She is doing to him what he does to everyone, describing, accurately, the thing that is there. He says yes. She looks at him. In the gray morning light of the border wood, with the changing gold above them and the stream behind him, and the smell of the last season of Nenya's preservation in the cold air, she looks at him with the full clarity of a being who has lived through 4 ages of the world and has spent those ages learning to see things as they are, rather than as she would prefer them to be. She says, you believe you have the right. He says, I believe I have the capacity. The right followed from accepting the capacity. A pause, not hesitation, he does not hesitate anymore, but the specific beat of a being allowing its words their proper space before continuing. This is what you refused to accept when Frodo offered you the ring. You understood that accepting the capacity would require accepting the right. You chose not to. Another beat. I chose differently. She cannot argue with this. She can say it is wrong. She does say it is wrong, in the language of someone who has thought about this for longer than most languages have existed and has found, in that thinking, a precision that does not require volume to carry its full weight. She says, the distinction between a will that serves and a will that rules is the only distinction that matters at this level, and he has crossed it, and the crossing cannot be undone by the goodness of the intentions that motivated it, because the intentions are no longer the operative force, the capacity is. And the capacity does not ask about intentions. She says, what you are building is not a world served by your love for it. It is a world defined by it, which is a different thing, which will feel from the inside like the same thing to everyone who lives in it, and that is the specific, permanent nature of what you have done. He hears her. He has always been willing to hear what is correct. The ring has not changed this, could not change this, because the hearing of correct things was never the quality that was in danger in him. What was in danger, and what has been lost, is the gap between hearing something correct and allowing it to stop him. He says, you are right about what I have done. You cannot tell me what I should have done instead while the number of the dead from the Pelennor alone is still in the air. She is quiet. She knows the number. She felt it in the ring network, in the moment she understood what had changed, the alternative timeline, the counterfactual dead, the specific price of the abstract principle of not doing this. She has been holding the number in her awareness since that morning at Caris Galadon when she took Nenya from her finger and understood what had changed in the world. She cannot make the number not real. She can only say that real numbers do not resolve philosophical questions. She says this, he says, they resolve the question of which philosophical position the dead would prefer. He uses the ring. Not suddenly, the motion is the extension of the conversation rather than a rupture in it. The same quality of settled intention that characterizes everything he does now. He extends the ring's preservative authority into the wood, not into Lothlorien specifically, but into the whole of the geography it borders, the full reach of the western world's green and growing things. He gives Galadriel's vision of Lothlorien as a refuge, a preserved beauty, a place where the world's best qualities are maintained against the entropy that would take them. He takes this vision and makes it continental. The entire Western world, preserved in the quality of care that she applied to this wood. Every forest maintained. Every river protected. Every wild place held in the specific golden stillness of a land that is cared for rather than consumed. He gives her everything she wanted. At the scale she never meant, she looks at what he has done. She stands in the border wood in the gray morning, and she looks at the world that Gandalf has made of her desire, the accurate version of it. The version in which everything she loved about Lothlorien is true of the entire world, preserved and golden and permanent, and she feels it the way you feel a word you know that means two opposite things, completely, and in both directions at once. She says, you have given me everything I wanted and none of what I meant. He says, that is because what you wanted and what you meant are not the same thing. I have given you the accurate version of your desire. She cannot say he is wrong about what she wanted. She wanted to preserve beautiful things. He has preserved them. She can only say he is wrong about what she meant, that the preservation was never the point, that the point was the living relationship between the preserving will and the thing preserved, the love that is a verb rather than a noun, the ongoing act of tending that gives the tended thing its meaning, that a world preserved by a will other than itself is not a preserved world. It is a kept one. In Gandalf's world, what she meant is now a category subject to his interpretation. And he has interpreted it correctly and missed it entirely, and both things are true, and neither cancels the other. She sets Nenya on the ground between them. Not offered, placed, the distinction is the whole of what remains available to her. She does not give it to him, does not surrender it, does not perform the political acknowledgement of his dominion that handing it to him would constitute. She sets it on the ground the way you set something down when you need both hands free and there is nothing left that requires both hands. It is the withdrawal of the self from the field, rather than the resistance of the self against the force. The refusal of the only kind still available in a world where all other refusals have been answered. He looks at it. He picks it up. He files it. He nods to her, the nod of a being who has understood what she has done and will not pretend otherwise, and turns back toward the stream. Karis Galadun endures behind her. The Malern trees will be maintained, not by Nenya's living preservation, but by the ring's archival authority, the sustaining of a thing for what it represents rather than for what it is. The golden light will remain adequate. The elves who walk the paths between the trees will be cared for with complete correctness. She watches him go. She does not move until he is gone. Then she turns back to the wood, the kept wood, the correctly maintained wood, the wood that is doing exactly what it is supposed to do, and she walks into it, and the preserved morning closes behind her without a sound. Gandalf does not call it a war. In the operational planning documents that circulate through the combined forces of Gondor and Rohan in the weeks before the march, documents organized by Saruman's archival corps, distributed through the administrative channels that have been running with increasing efficiency since the Order's establishment. The campaign against Mordor is designated a remediation project. The word is precise. It was chosen with the same care applied to every word in the Order's formal record, because it is accurate, and accuracy is now the primary standard to which all language in Middle-earth is held. Remediation, the systematic correction of a long-standing contamination. The restoration of a degraded environment to functional condition. The removal of structures that should not exist from a geography that existed, for most of its history, without them. Barad Doctor has been there for 3,000 years. The Black Gate was raised in the Second Age. The plateau of Gorgoroth has been a landscape of ash and fire for so long that men now alive have never seen it as anything else. The remediation will be thorough, and it will take time, and it will produce, at the end of it, a geography that the world has not seen since before Sauron raised his tower and poured his will into the volcanic architecture of the mountain he chose as his foundry. Gandalf knows exactly what Mordor looks like beneath the ash. The ring knows. It was made here, in the fires of Orodruin, by a hand that understood this landscape before it was corrupted, and the understanding is preserved in the ring's architecture the way a seed preserves the structure of the tree it came from. He walks toward the Black Gate with an army at his back and a complete cartographic knowledge of what the land beneath the ash contains, and the combination of these things, the force and the knowledge, is not a military operation. It is a key turning in a lock whose specifications are already understood. The Nazgul feel the shift before the army reaches the Morannon. They have always been oriented toward the ring. Not by choice, their nature does not include the category of choice, not in any meaningful sense, not after 3,000 years of progressive reduction to instruments of a single will. They are oriented toward the ring the way a compass is oriented toward north, structurally, inevitably, without any process of decision occurring between the orientation and its expression. The ring has been their north for 3 ages. The ring has moved. This does not free them. The binding is in the fabric of what they are, the 9 rings they carry, still on their fingers or burned into the architecture of whatever physical coherence remains to them. Still connected to the one ring's operational field. They will not dissolve. They cannot rebel. What they experience, in the days before the army's arrival at the Morannon, is something their existence has not previously contained: disorientation. The compass is still a compass. The north has simply moved to a direction that their entire being has never pointed. They circle above Barad Diour in the gray air, waiting for instruction from a source that is no longer where it was, oriented toward a ring that is no longer in the hand it built its authority around. Below them, the orc armies of Mordor stand in their camps on the plateau with the specific stillness of a military force whose command structure has just experienced an event that the command structure did not anticipate and for which no contingency exists. Sauron's forces do not break and run. They are better trained than that, more thoroughly organized than any army in Middle-earth's history. And their discipline holds even when the frequency they are organized around goes silent. But discipline without direction is a machine without a task. It runs, correctly, toward nothing. The Black Gate opens before Gandalf's army reaches it. The timing is precise. The gate begins to move at approximately 400 yards, which is the distance at which the ring's operational field reaches the gate's defenders with sufficient authority to interrupt the intention of resistance. Not to command them, there is no direct command issued. The interruption is more fundamental. The defenders feel, at 400 yards, the same thing that has been felt by everything that has encountered the ring's presence since Khazad Diem. The recognition of an authority that precedes their current allegiance. The body making a decision that the mind has not finished reaching. The gate opens. Gandalf's army enters Mordor without a battle. What follows is methodological. He moves through the landscape of the Dark Land with the ring's knowledge of its construction active and complete, feeling Barad Doctor's architecture from the inside. The way you feel the structure of a building you helped design, knowing where the weight is carried and where it is not, where the foundation is certain and where it is contingent, where the removal of one element will begin the organized dissolution of the whole. He does not bring siege weapons against the tower's walls. He brings the ring's authority to bear on the tower's foundations, specifically on the specific properties of the stone and iron that Sauron used in the building, which were shaped under the ring's influence, and retain in their molecular structure the record of that shaping. Made things can be unmade by someone who understands how they were built. Stone by stone, in the orderly sequence of a demolition conducted by the architect rather than the opponent, Barad Doctor begins to come down. The Witch King arrives at the border of Mordor on the 5th day. He comes from the northwest, from Minas Morgul through the Morgul Vale, and he comes alone, which is itself a statement. The deliberate choice of a being who understands the rhetoric of arrival and has chosen the form that communicates, this requires only me. He is the greatest of the 9 in every relevant dimension, the most ancient, the most powerful, the most skilled in the specific arts of command and terror that have made the Nazgul the most effective force multipliers in Sauron's military history. He broke Gondor's greatest captain at the gates of the city Gandalf now governs. He conquered the entire north and held it for centuries against everything men and dwarves could bring. He is, by every military assessment ever conducted of him, the being least likely to be managed. He comes to the border intending to fight. His mace is in his hand, the black iron of it visible in the gray Mordor air, the specific weight of it carried in the posture of someone who knows how to hold a weapon at the precise angle that communicates both readiness and authority. His screech when it comes is the full instrument, the sound that has broken shields and wills, and the morale of armies that had held everything else. The specific frequency of a corrupted Maya's voice at the outer limit of its capacity. It rolls across the ash plains of Gorgoroth and finds, in its path, no answering fear. Gandalf is standing on the broken rubble of the outer gate at Barad Doctor's base when the screech arrives. He is holding a document, one of the organizational charts for the Gorgoroth remediation's second phase, the systematic clearing of the northernmost section of the plateau. He looks up. He watches the Witch King complete the screech. He watches the mace extended at full arm's length in the posture of challenge. He watches the fell beast circle twice above the position, the wing beats audible at this distance, the shadow of them moving across the ash in the flat light. He gives all of this his full, patient, unhurried attention. He waits for the performance to finish. The screech ends. The mace is still extended. The fell beast lands 20 yards behind its rider with the sound of enormous weight meeting uncertain ground. Gandalf folds the organizational chart. He says, in the black speech that he has spoken without difficulty since long before this ring came onto his hand, you were, before the 9 rings, a great king. You administered a kingdom of considerable complexity across difficult terrain with a competence that your contemporaries did not match. The Witch King is still. The mace is still extended. Gandalf says, the plateau requires a project manager of equivalent competence. The timeline is 18 months. The scope is complete ash clearance, soil assessment, and the installation of the primary drainage infrastructure for the Eastern Agricultural Zone. He holds out the organizational chart. The reporting structure is here. Silence, the fell beast shifts its weight behind its rider. The ash plains of Gorgoroth extend in all directions in the gray morning, the most damaged landscape in Middle-earth, the geography of 3 ages of deliberate ruin. Waiting, the Witch King of Angmar looks at the organizational chart. He takes it. He does not bow. He does not speak. He takes the document in the hand that held the mace now lowered, now held at his side with the loose carry of a weapon that is not going to be used, and he looks at it with the specific attention of someone who has just been given a large, complex, logistically challenging project and whose intelligence, buried under 3,000 years of Sauron's suppression but never destroyed, is already assessing the scope. He was, before everything, very good at this. He turns toward the plateau and begins to work. Sauron's spirit does not flee. This is the detail that distinguishes him. At the end, from everything he has made and everything he has commanded, the animals flee. The orcs scatter when their operational field collapses. The lesser servants of the Dark Land disperse toward the edges of the plateau with the instinctive urgency of beings whose entire orientation has just lost its center. The spirit of the greatest Maya who chose the wrong side of the oldest war does not flee. It drifts. This is not courage. It is not resignation. It is the specific condition of a being whose physical coherence has been dissolved by the progressive dismantling of the architecture that sustained it, the tower, the forges. The volcanic infrastructure of a mountain that was shaped over 3,000 years to serve as the physical expression of a single will, and who is now present in the world without the structure that gave that presence form. He is not destroyed. A Maya cannot be destroyed by anything short of the authority that created them, and that authority has not acted. He is dispersed, his will still present, his intelligence still intact, his 3,000 years of accumulated knowledge still organized and accessible, but without the body, the ring, or the architectural home that would give those things a location in the physical world. He drifts above the ash plains of Gorgoroth in the gray morning light, like heat drifts above stone, present, measurable by its effects on the surrounding air, but without the hard edges that would make it possible to point at and say, there, exactly there. Gandalf feels him immediately. He does not search. The ring is the instrument of its maker's power, and the maker is the presence currently diffused across the thermal columns rising from the plateau's eastern ash fields. Present in the ring's awareness the way a craftsman's hand is present in the work it made, the signature of the making still legible in the made thing's deepest structure. The ring knows Sauron the way a lock knows its key, completely, specifically, at the level of the mechanism rather than the surface. Gandalf sets down the evening's administrative reports. The Witch King's first progress summary from the Northern Clearance Operation, accurate and detailed and delivered precisely on schedule, and walks east across the rubble of Barad Doctor's base toward the ash fields. The army is camped along the Gorgoroth's western edge. The remediation crews have completed their work for the day. The plateau is quiet in the specific way of a large-scale project site at the end of its first phase. The silence of work completed rather than work absent. The settlement of dust and machinery into the earned stillness of a productive day ended correctly. He walks alone into the ash field. He stops at the place where the thermal columns are strongest. The intersection of three geological lines of heat that rise from the deeper magma chambers beneath the plateau. The place where Orodruin's influence on the surface rock is most direct. Here the air is warm in a way that has nothing to do with the gray sky above. Here the specific wrongness of Sauron's dispersed presence is most concentrated. Not visible, not audible, but present in the way that certain things are present to the senses that exist in a Maya's nature below the physical ones. The sense that registers the quality of a will rather than its expression. The sense that Gandalf has been using since Khazad DM to read everything he encounters at its foundational level. He stands in the warm ash field and he is quiet. The binding is not a battle. This is the most important thing to understand about what happens next, and the thing most likely to be misunderstood by anyone who has known Sauron only as an enemy to be fought. The binding is not a battle, because Sauron, in his current state, is not a combatant. He is a problem of a specific technical kind, the containment of a will that is too strong to dissipate naturally and too dangerous to leave unconfined, and Gandalf approaches it as the technical problem it is. He uses the ring, not its authority over minds, not its capacity for dominion over living wills, not the inspirational fire of Narya that runs through its operational field like warmth through metal. He uses the aspect of the ring that Sauron himself understood best and most completely, its mastery over the structures of making and binding, the foundational craft of a Maya of Ol's order who understood, before anything else, that the deepest power available to any being in the created world is the power to determine what holds together and what comes apart. He reaches into the structure of Arda itself, not metaphorically, not through some mystical intermediary, but with the specific, technical precision of a craftsman applying a learned skill to a material he has spent 2,000 years studying. The world has structure at levels below the visible, the agreements between elements, the tensions between geological forces, the specific architecture of the deep relationships between matter and the energy that moves through it. He has always known this. The ring makes the knowing applicable. He finds in the thermal column at the intersection of the three geological lines a fold, a natural fold. The world is full of them, places where the structure of Arda turns back on itself at the deep level, creating interior spaces that have no visible expression on the surface, but that exist with complete physical reality in the layer of the world's architecture that most beings never perceive. He finds this fold and he opens it. Not violently, not destructively, with the same careful application of force that a craftsman uses when opening a join that was designed to be opened. The fold widens. An interior space becomes available, a space in which something present in the world's structure could be placed, and sealed, and held. Not tortured. Not diminished further than the dispersal has already diminished. Not punished in any sense that involves the ongoing experience of punishment. Simply stopped. Present in the architecture of the world, sealed into a fold of its deep structure, unable to think new thoughts or form new intentions or reach outward toward the world that continues above the place of binding. Preserved in the precise sense, alive, intact, permanent, and entirely inert. He reaches for Sauron's dispersed presence in the thermal air of the ash field. He gathers it, not roughly, not with the triumph of a victorious enemy, but with the careful, thorough completeness of a craftsman collecting a material that must be handled correctly or it will be wasted. He draws the dispersed will together, reads its current state with the ring's full perceptive capacity, and places it in the fold. He seals it. Sauron's last coherent experience is a recognition, not rage. Rage requires a target and a belief in the possibility of effect. And Sauron's intelligence is precise enough to know that rage here would be data spent on nothing. Not despair. Despair requires a prior state of hope, and Sauron has not operated from hope in 3,000 years. Something quieter and more fundamental than either, a specific and exact understanding that arrives in the last moment of coherent thought like the final piece of a calculation clicking into place. He was always going to lose to this. Not to power. His power at its height was greater than what just bound him, and he knows this with the accuracy of self-knowledge that his intelligence has always maintained even at its most corrupted. Not to goodness, which he has never granted the status of a force capable of defeating him in the structural sense. To the specific thing that Gandalf has become, a will that has made itself the unquestioned order of the world. A craftsman who accepted the Maker's authority and built, from that acceptance, a claim on making itself. He was always trying to become this. He was always going to lose to it, because corruption is disorder dressed as order, and disorder is always defeated by order in the end. Not immediately, not without cost, but with the mathematical certainty of a proof that holds regardless of the time it takes to complete. He knew this. He has known this since before the world was shaped. He organized his entire existence around the attempt to escape it, to be the order rather than the disorder, to be the craftsman rather than the material. To be the one who holds rather than the one who is held. He forgot that you cannot become what you corrupt. He is remembering it now, in the last moment before the seal closes and the coherent thought ends. The fold closes. The thermal column settles. The ash field returns to its ordinary quality of warmth and silence. Gandalf walks back across the rubble of Barad Doctor's base to the supply depot at the camp's eastern edge. He requests, from the materials inventory of the remediation project, 1 milestone stone, the standard Menrian road marker, dark gray granite, cut to a specific size and weight that the old highway engineers determined was optimal for stability in variable soil conditions. It is an unremarkable object. There are 400 of them in the supply inventory, designated for the new road network that will connect the remediated plateau to the southern passes. He takes one and carries it to the ash field and places it at the location of the binding. It settles into the ash without drama. He takes a chisel from his coat, the small one, the one he uses for precise work, and inscribes on its face, in Quenya, one sentence. Here the enemy's thought ends, and the world's thought continues. He puts the chisel away. He looks at the stone for a moment with the expression of a craftsman assessing completed work, not satisfied, not proud, not relieved. Accurate. The stone is accurate. The sentence is accurate. The placement is correct. 3 ages of darkness. The domination of Menor. The war of the last alliance. The long, patient shadow of the Third Age. The 9 kings and the cities that fell, and the peoples that were bent, and the fire that never stopped burning in the mountain above this plateau. A milestone marker. 1 sentence. He turns away from it and walks back to camp. The Witch King's second progress summary is due in the morning, and the Eastern Drainage Infrastructure Assessment requires his review before the survey teams can begin Phase 3. The administrative work of the remediation does not pause for the resolution of 3,000-year-old problems. The stone settles into the ash of Gorgoroth behind him, gray and ordinary and precisely where it should be. Sauron is filed correctly. The world's thought continues. The Pelennor fields bloom in spring, not because anyone planted them, because the land, under the ring's continuous preservative attention, is doing what land does when it is cared for rather than consumed, expressing its own capacity. Producing from its own depth the flowers that the years of siege and ash and the grinding occupation of armies had suppressed rather than eliminated. The bulbs were always there, the seeds were in the soil through all of it. What they required was simply the removal of the thing that was preventing them, and Gandalf has removed it. And the plain before Minas Tirith in the first spring of the Fourth Age is the most completely flowering landscape anyone now alive has seen. It is genuinely beautiful. This cannot be said with irony and must not be. The beauty is real, the flowers are real. The specific quality of the Pelennor in early morning with the white mountains behind it and the city above it, and the new-made roads crossing the plain in their precise geometry carrying the first commerce of the new order, this is real beauty. The kind that does not require a favorable interpretation to be recognized as what it is. The world is, by every measurable standard, the best it has been since the years of the trees. The rivers run clean. This is a fact that the peoples who live along them register in the specific, unglamorous way that people register the correction of something that should never have been wrong, with relief, and without ceremony. The Anduin carries no ash below the Emyn Muil. The streams of the Shire run at the clarity they ran at before the pipeweed industry expanded upstream. The harbor at Pelargir, which had accumulated 3 decades of military and industrial fouling along its banks, has been remediated to the specifications of the new Environmental Management Charter and smells, for the first time in living memory, of water rather than of what has been done to it. The roads are extraordinary. The cities are clean. The granaries are full. Disease in the northwestern zones is at the lowest recorded incidence in Gondor's administrative history. Children who would have died of the winter fevers that the Third Age accepted as a structural feature of the cold months do not die. Mothers who would have gone through the specific, permanent damage of losing a child go through other things instead. These facts have no dramatic expression. They are simply true, and they accumulate, and their accumulation is the most significant thing that has happened to ordinary people across Middle-earth in the first year of the New Order. None of it is surprising. This is the detail that the facts carry underneath them, the quality that runs through every clean river and full granary and repaired road like a current beneath still water. None of it was in doubt. It was always going to be this. The ring's authority applied to the problems of governance produces correct outcomes with the same consistency that mathematics produces correct answers. Not because the application is inspired, but because inspiration is no longer the operative variable. Correctness is. And correctness, applied with sufficient power and sufficient will, produces results that are indistinguishable from miracles, and entirely without the quality that makes miracles worth having, the fact of their having been uncertain. Art is made in the first year of the Fourth Age. Music is composed. Stories are told around fires in the Shire and in the halls of Edoras, and in the rebuilt quarters of what was Minas Tirith and is now Minas Tirith still. Because Gandalf saw no reason to change the name is accurate, the city is what it has always been, the renaming would be a falsification for the sake of a symbol, and he does not produce falsifications. Art is made, and it is real. He has not suppressed the creative instinct, he loves it too genuinely for the ring-corrupted version of his will to have eliminated it, and the creative instinct of the peoples of Middle-earth is not the kind of thing that can be eliminated by external force in any case. It is too deep in them, it is part of what they are. But the ambient field of his authority permeates everything. Not visibly, not as a felt pressure, not as a censor reviewing work before it reaches its audience. Simply as the quality of the air in which all things are now made, an air in which the fundamental questions have been answered, in which the orientation of the world has been settled, in which the specific creative anxiety of making something in a world where the outcome is uncertain has been resolved by the removal of the uncertainty. The art produced in this air is excellent. The music is precisely constructed. The stories are told well, with correct pacing and accurate emotional beats, and the craft of people who have inherited a tradition and are maintaining it with skill. None of it is surprising. This is what the poets will eventually, in the slow, private way that people name things they are not sure they are permitted to name, call the white silence. Not silence in the acoustic sense. The world is full of sound, full of commerce and conversation and the ordinary noise of lived life. Silence in the sense of the absence of a specific frequency that the world used to carry, the frequency of the unexpected, the not yet decided, the thing that might be true or might not, and whose being or not being is still in the process of being determined. The silence of a question that has been answered. The silence of a story that has been told. Bilbo Baggins is 129 years old in the first year of the Fourth Age and is still working on his book. He has been working on it for decades, the great accumulation of his long life's experience and his longer life's reading. The history of the War of the Ring as he has assembled it from Frodo's accounts and his own memories, and the documents he has been given access to in Rivendell's library, which is now the administrative center of the Misty Mountains sub-district and whose archival holdings are more organized than they have ever been and less alive. The book is enormous. It is also, he knows with the precision of someone who has been writing long enough to know the difference between a large thing and a finished thing, nearly done. He shows Gandalf a chapter in the 43rd week of the New Order. Gandalf reads it at the desk in his receiving room in the administrative center. With the afternoon light coming through the window and the organized sounds of the new city's functioning audible below. He reads with the specific, complete attention he brings to everything. He notes 3 factual inaccuracies. Dates in the appendices that Bilbo has carried over from an earlier draft that contained a copying error, now preserved through 4 subsequent versions. He notes 2 passages where Bilbo's memory has softened the reality in ways that are understandable and human and wrong. He sets the manuscript down. Bilbo says, "Well, what did you think?" Gandalf says, "It is accurate." The word lands in the room. Bilbo holds it in his awareness. The word accurate, the highest grade available in the current system's vocabulary of assessment. The thing that all work is now evaluated against. The ceiling of the possible. He picks up his pen. He holds it over a blank page. He does not write anything. He sets the pen down. He goes outside to smoke. He sits on the steps of the administrative center in the Rivendell afternoon with his pipe and the specific expression of a man who has just been told something that he cannot explain and cannot refute and cannot write about and therefore cannot quite yet survive. He does not return to the book for 6 months. When he does not change a word. The words are accurate. The ships are the finest things Círdan has ever built. He knows this not as a judgment, but as a measurement. The assessment of a craftsman who has been building ships for longer than most of Middle-earth's current inhabitants have been a species, who has refined the art across 10,000 years of application until the refinement itself has become a form of knowledge that exists below the conscious level, in the hands rather than the mind. He knows these ships are the finest by the specific quality of their completion, the absence of the small, accumulated compromises that appear in any work done under ordinary conditions. The slight asymmetries in material concessions and timing pressures that leave their mark in even the best work when the worker has the ordinary proportion of time and resource and urgency. He built these ships with more urgency than he has ever brought to anything. The urgency produced perfection. This is the specific irony of it, that the pressure of what was coming, the knowledge of the window closing, the sea longing of every elf remaining in Middle-earth becoming in the months after the Three's removal an unbearable physical fact rather than the quiet, manageable ache it had always been before, all of this produced the finest ships ever made from the hands of the finest shipwright who has ever lived. They ride at anchor in the harbor of the Grey Havens in the gray morning of a year 2 spring, and they are ready, and they are beautiful, and they are going nowhere. The elves gathered at the havens number more than the harbor has held since the First Age's end. They have come from every remaining concentration of elvish life in Middle-earth, from Lothlorien's archived golden wood, from Rivendell's administrative corridors, from the scattered woodland settlements of the northwest that the survey reached and incorporated and left standing, but changed. They carry what elves carry when they finally go, themselves, the memories, the art, the particular quality of attention that an elvish mind brings to the world, 10,000 years of accumulated perception, each elf a living archive of the world as it was in the ages before men were the dominant fact of it. They are ready. The sea longing is past the point of management. It has become, in the months since Nenya and Vilya were set down, a physical urgency, the compass needle pulling toward its north with a force that the bearer can acknowledge and resist but cannot, anymore, forget. Círdan has been at the harbor's edge since before dawn. Not because there is work to do, the work is finished. The ships are ready. The tide schedules have been assessed and the optimal departure window identified, and the passengers organized by ship assignment with the careful thoroughness of a harbor master who has been doing this for every age of the world. There is no work left. He is at the harbor's edge because it is where he has always been, and because the not knowing of exactly when Gandalf will arrive does not change the appropriate posture, which is to be at the harbor facing the sea and ready. He feels Gandalf's approach the same way he has always felt significant arrivals, not through any mystical sense, but through the accumulated attentiveness of a being who has spent 10,000 years paying complete attention to this specific shore. The quality of the morning changes. The elves gathered along the harbor road go quiet in the sequence of people becoming aware of something arriving. Círdan does not turn. Gandalf walks to the harbor's edge and stands beside him. They look at the ships together for a long moment. The gray water, the perfect hulls, the rigging that Círdan's hands have set and will not need to adjust. The morning light on all of it, flat and clear and without particular comment. Gandalf does not begin with the prohibition. He begins, as he has always begun, with the argument, because he has always believed that the argument is owed before the conclusion, that the person on the receiving end of a significant decision has the right to hear the reasoning before the fact. The Ring has not changed this. What it has changed is the relationship between the argument and the outcome. He makes the case. It is a genuine case, not constructed to manipulate, not deployed as theater to soften what was always going to happen. He genuinely believes what he says. He has always genuinely believed the things he says, and this is, in its way, the deepest problem available in Gandalf's world. He says, the elves are the living link to the ancient world. The knowledge they carry, of the First Age's light, of the art of Beleriand, of the texture of the world before the wars remade it, is not in any archive. It is in them. It is the kind of knowledge that exists only in the minds that hold it, and dies with the minds that leave. He says, the world has been saved. Now it must be tended, and the tending requires memory. And the memory requires the ones who have it. He says, who will tend it if the ones who know it best leave? Galadriel is among those gathered at the Havens. She has been here for 3 days, not waiting, not hoping, not performing the posture of someone who expects the outcome to be different than it is. Simply present. At the end of the road she has been walking since she set Nenya on the ground in the border wood and stepped back. She speaks from the middle of the gathered elves with the voice of someone who has already made the statement in her mind many times and is now simply making it aloud. She says, you kept us here to tend a world you have already decided the shape of. You do not need us. A pause, not for effect. She has never spoken for effect, but for the accuracy of what follows. You want witnesses. You want an audience for what you have built. The morning holds this. The harbor water moves against the dock pilings in its ordinary rhythm. The ships ride at anchor 20 yards out with the patience of things that have been made correctly and are simply waiting for the use they were made for. Gandalf is quiet for a moment. He looks at the ships. He looks at the gathered elves along the harbor road, the last significant population of elves remaining in Middle-earth. 10,000 years of accumulated perception and love and the specific, ancient grief of a people who have outlasted the ages they were made for. He looks at Galadriel. He says, yes. That is also true. He turns to Círdan. He speaks the formal prohibition in Quenya, the language of authority in matters of this kind, the language the straight road was built in. The language in which Ilúvatar gave the elves their sea longing and Círdan received his charge over this harbor at the beginning of the world's current shape. The prohibition is precise. It names what is prohibited, the authority under which the prohibition is issued, and the terms under which the harbor will continue to function, as a port of the Western Administrative Zone, maintained by its current harbor master, serving the commerce of the new order. It does not name a duration. It does not name an appeal process. It does not contain a future tense in which the ships might sail. Círdan listens to all of it. He faces the sea throughout. When Gandalf finishes, the harbor is quiet. The gathered elves do not speak. There is no response available to them that is not either insufficient or inaccurate, and they are a people who have always preferred silence to inaccuracy. Círdan turns from the water. He turns in the specific, complete way of a being performing an action that his body has not performed in this direction in 10,000 years. The harbor master turning his back on his harbor. The shipwright facing inland for the first time in an age. He looks at Gandalf with eyes that are the oldest eyes in Middle-earth, eyes that have seen the world in its first age when it was new and the light of the trees was still in it, eyes that have registered every diminishment of every age with the complete, permanent attention of a being for whom nothing is forgotten and nothing has ever been made easier by repetition. He says, "Do you know what you are?" Gandalf says, "Yes." Círdan looks at him for a long time. He looks at him with the face of the oldest living thing in Middle-earth, with 10,000 years of witnessing behind it, with the complete absence of the capacity to be surprised that comes not from cynicism, but from having lived long enough to have encountered every available form of the things that happen in the world. He looks at Gandalf and he sees what Gandalf is, completely, clearly, in all its dimensions, with all its genuine love and genuine loss and genuine horror and the absolute impossibility of undoing any of it. He says, "Then there is nothing more I can tell you." He walks past Gandalf on the harbor road. He walks inland. The road beneath his feet is the road he has walked since before the road existed in its current form. The road he has always walked in the direction of the sea and never in the direction he is walking now. His footsteps on the old stone are even and unhurried, and carry the specific, complete grief of a being who has run out of the forms available for what he is feeling and has settled into the simple physical fact of continuing. Behind him, the gathered elves remain at the harbor. The ships ride at anchor. The straight road runs beneath the sea in the deeper topology of the world, exactly where it has always been, in a direction that the physical sea's curvature cannot reach, and that the ships cannot now be permitted to follow. Gandalf watches Círdan until the road takes him out of sight. The morning continues. The harbor water moves. The most beautiful ships ever built by the most skilled hands in Middle-earth's history ride at their moorings in the flat gray light. Going nowhere. Tended and perfect and permanent. A harbor full of readiness that will not be used. He does not call himself king. The word is available. No one would contest it. No one would correct him. No one in the administrative apparatus of the order would so much as pause in their work if the title appeared in the formal documentation. He has considered it with the same precision he applies to every question of nomenclature, what the word means, what it costs, what it signals about the relationship between the one who holds it and the thing being held. He has decided against it. Not from modesty. Modesty requires the possibility of a higher assessment from which one is withdrawing. And there is no higher assessment available in the current administrative structure of the world. From accuracy. A king is the legitimate sovereign of a people who have recognized his claim. What Gandalf is something that has no accurate word in any language currently spoken in Middle-earth. He uses the word steward. He knows this is wrong. He uses it because it is wrong in a way that has precedent, and because precedent, in the absence of accuracy, is the next best thing. He sits in the highest room of the Tower of Icthelion, at the desk he has occupied since the first week of the Order's establishment, dark stone, worn smooth at its edges by 10 years of use, positioned so that the window faces west. He has never changed the desk's position. He has looked west every morning for 10 years, across the rooftops of the city and the Pelennor Plain and the distant dark line of the misty mountains, at the direction from which he came when he arrived in Middle-earth and toward which, with the gray havens closed, he will not return. He works. He is always working. The reports of Year 10 are the finest the Order has produced. 10 years of administrative refinement have brought the provincial reporting structures to a precision that the first year's documents, competent, thorough, already far beyond anything the Third Age's governance achieved, would not have recognized as continuous with themselves. The Witch King's Northern Summary runs to 47 pages and contains, in its appendices, the most complete demographic survey of the former Arnor territories ever compiled. Commel's Eastern Assessment projects a 6% yield increase in the rain agricultural zones for Year 11, based on soil improvement data from 3 successive growing seasons, and the projection is, Gandalf calculates, accurate to within 0.3%. He reads all of it. He misses nothing. He makes the decisions that the reports require, and files the decisions with the clean, unhurried dispatch of a being for whom the gap between knowing the correct answer and writing it down has ceased to exist as a meaningful interval. The work is correct. It has been correct for 10 years. It will be correct for as long as he applies to it the attention he is applying now, which is as long as there is a world to apply it to. He sets the morning's files aside. He looks out the window. Aragorn is in the angle. He has been there since Year 2, when it became clear that attendance at the Order's councils was not something Aragorn intended to provide, and that Gandalf had decided. With the specific mercy available to a being who loves someone and has made that person's future impossible, to permit the non-attendance indefinitely. He lives in the house his people have kept in the angle since before the kingdom they were named for ceased to exist. He hunts. He maintains the land. He grows, year by year. into the particular quality of age that belongs to men of the Nedane line, a distinguished age, a precise and dignified diminishment, the slow physical reduction of a form that was extraordinary and is becoming, with the same thoroughness it brought to everything, extraordinary at being old. Arwen is with him. She is always with him. She made her choice in the way she makes every choice, with complete understanding of what the choice meant and what it would cost, and without, as far as Gandalf has ever been able to perceive, any significant regret about the cost. They have been in the angle together for 8 years, and they are, by every available measure, genuinely content. They have no children. Gandalf has thought about this. He has thought about it in the specific way he thinks about everything now, completely, without the friction of hope that what the thinking reveals will be different from what he suspected before he began. The line of Isildur requires children, and there are none, and there will be none. Arwen came to Middle-earth and stayed in a world that has been determined. And the determined world produces in the people who live in it the specific, invisible reluctance to bring new lives into a story that has already been told. He has never told Aragorn that he has made this calculation. He has filed it under costs of the arrangement, correctly assessed, accepted. The line of Isildur will end with Aragorn. The knowledge is in the administrative record. The record is accurate. Frodo is in Bag End. The Red Book has been in the drawer of the study desk for 3 years. Before that, he wrote in it every day for 6 years. The most complete account of the War of the Ring ever assembled, the history of the quest as it actually happened, with every detail attended to with the precision of a writer who understands that the details are the history, and that getting them right is not a perfectionist's indulgence, but a moral obligation to the things that happened. He wrote it the way he does everything, completely, with his full attention, with the love that he has always brought to the things that mattered to him. He finished it. He put it in the drawer. He turned the key. He went outside and sat in the garden in the afternoon light and did not go back inside for the rest of the day, and the next day he went outside again, and the day after that. And the pattern of his days reorganized itself in the months that followed around the specific gravity of the locked drawer, around the thing that was in it, and what it contained, and why he had stopped. Gandalf asked him once in Year 7, during one of the administrative visits to Sub-District 7, that his role requires annually what was in it. Frodo said, "Everything that happened." Gandalf said, "Good." Frodo looked at him for a moment with an expression that Gandalf could not entirely read. It was the first expression Gandalf had not been able to entirely read in a very long time, and the not reading of it stayed with him longer than the expressions he had read, which is perhaps the point. That was 3 years ago. The white tree is blooming. It has been blooming since Year 1, since the morning after Gandalf's arrival in Minas Tirith, when the ring's preservative authority reached the courtyard, and the tree, which had been alive and leafed and silent for a century, produced its first blossom in the new order with the same unremarkable thoroughness that everything in Gandalf's world produces its correct output. It blooms every spring. The blossoms are white and perfect, and they are exactly what blossoms of the white tree are supposed to look like. The ancient lineage of Nimloth of Menor, of Galathilion of Tirion, of the light of the 2 trees at the beginning of the world, expressed in petals in a courtyard in the city that Anrion built. The tree blooms for the true king. There is no true king. There is a steward, in the highest room of the tower above it, who has solved the question of the true king by making kingship a category the world no longer requires. The tree does not know this. The tree is not an administrative instrument. It is a living thing of ancient lineage whose behavior is governed not by the Order's charter, but by the deep, pre-political nature of its connection to the line it was planted to honor. It blooms because the ring's authority reaches it, and the ring's authority is the greatest authority currently present in the world, and the tree, in the depth of its living nature, cannot distinguish between the authority it was made to respond to and the authority that has replaced it. The bloom is the most terrible thing in the courtyard. It is the most terrible thing in the city. It is white and perfect, and it means nothing at all, and it will not stop. Gandalf is at his window at dawn when the memory arrives. Not a vision. The ring does not traffic in visions, has never traded in anything that is not actual. A memory, specific, sensory, complete. Frodo on the bridge of Khazad-dûm, standing at the eastern edge where the Fellowship had pressed itself against the door, watching Gandalf in the moment after the Balrog's ash had settled and the word had been spoken, and the thing had been done. The child's face in the torchlight, the hand going to the neck, the instinctive reach for the chain, the automatic check for the weight that had lived there since Bag End, the fingers finding the place where it was and closing on nothing. the expression on Frodo's face in that moment. Gandalf has been trying to name it accurately for 10 years. He names things accurately. It is the primary discipline of his existence, and the primary gift of what he carries. He has named the expressions of kings and stewards and the oldest beings in the world with a precision that has never failed him. He has not, in 10 years of returning to this memory in the quiet hours before the administrative day begins, been able to name what was on Frodo Baggins's face in the moment he understood that the chain was empty. He names it now. In the gray dawn of year 10, with the white tree blooming below his window and the most organized civilization in the history of the world processing itself toward another correct day, he finds the word. Recognition, not of what the ring was. Frodo had always known what the ring was, had known it with a clarity that cost him everything and defined him entirely. Recognition of what the loss of it meant. The loss of the specific burden that was also the specific honor. The weight that was also the answer to the question that had been asked of him, and only him, in all the world, the question of whether a hobbit from the Shire could carry the thing that the great could not carry and bring it to the place where it needed to go. The question that Frodo was the answer to. Gandalf gave him his life. He gave him safety, and the Shire, and the garden, and the long peaceful years that the quest would have cost him. He gave him everything that a being with the ring's authority could give a hobbit from Bag End. He took the question away, not Frodo's safety. Frodo is alive and well, and the garden is exceptional, and the pipeweed in the South Farthing is the finest it has ever been. Not Frodo's happiness, which is real in the specific way that everything in Gandalf's world is real, genuine, present, and shaped at its edges by a will that is not Frodo's own. What Gandalf took was the thing that cannot be administered and cannot be restored, and does not appear in any of the 47 provincial reports currently organized on the desk behind him. The particular, unaccountable, unring-able fact of Frodo Baggins being the person the world turned on. The person who decided. The person the question was asked of. In a drawer in the study of Bag End, the red book sits with its key turned. Frodo locked it because the story is finished and he does not want to read a finished story. He wants to write another one. He has not been able to find, in 10 years of mornings in a garden that is perfectly maintained in a world that has been perfectly determined, the beginning of a sentence that is his own. The ring is warm on Gandalf's hand. It is always warm. The warmth of a purpose fully served, of an intention fully realized, of a will that has found its complete expression in the world it set out to save and cannot now be separated from the saving. He looks at it in the gray dawn light. He looks out his west-facing window at the world he loves, the clean rivers, the blooming plain, the roads carrying their correct freight toward the full granaries, the city waking below him into another day of its best self. He does not move from the window for a long time. The fourth age is the age of the white silence. The world is saved. The world has never been more completely, more permanently, more correctly saved. Every life that should continue, continues. Every beautiful thing that should be preserved, is preserved. Every question that should be answered has been answered, finally and fully, by the being at the window who loved the world too completely to allow it to remain in danger, and who has been standing at this window every morning for 10 years, watching the answer hold. In the Shire, in the drawer, the red book waits. Frodo sits in his garden in the morning with his pipe and the blank page and the pen he picked up and set down again, trying to find, in the perfectly tended silence of the world as it now is, a story that begins with something he decided. The pen is in his hand. He has not yet found the first word. He will look for it tomorrow. He will look for it in all the tomorrows that are coming, warm, correct, carefully maintained, exactly as long as they are supposed to be. The story that was asked of a hobbit was answered by someone who could not bear to let the hobbit carry it alone. The pen waits. The garden is perfect. The world has been saved by a love so total that it left no room for the beloved to save anything themselves. And that is the final, quiet, unrecorded cost of the white silence, filed nowhere, known by one, carried by another. The White King stands at his window. The morning continues. The hobbit does not write.